clothes piled on the floor, jeans, mine, his, until it was just us, skin on skin, the couch too small but perfect for this. He paused, hovering over me, eyes locked on mine, a question in them. "Ellie," he said breathless. "You sure?" Hey everyone, don't forget to smash that like button, share your thoughts below, and subscribe for more crazy stories. Now, let's dive into this one. I wasn't banking on anything wild that Thursday night. Just a chill evening in my cozy little house on the edge of Pine Hollow, a nowhere town hugged by oak trees and winding creeks. The plan was simple: kick back with a lemonade, flip through a magazine, and let the week's stress melt away. Living out here, where the biggest thrill is the Friday football game, you don't expect much. But fate's got a knack for flipping the script, and that night, it threw me a twist I never saw coming. It kicked off with a call from my old pal Dana. "Hey, Ellie, you remember my cousin Jake?" Her voice crackled through the phone as I sprawled on my faded plaid couch. Jake. It rang a faint bell. Some gangly kid with scraped elbows who used to tag along at summer picnics. "Yeah, your aunt's boy, right? Always had a popsicle stuck to his shirt?" I said, grinning. Dana chuckled. "That's the one. Well, he's all grown up now. 19, fresh out of high school, and crashing at my place for a bit before he starts mechanic training. I'm slammed with a work thing. Can you help him out?" I sat up, curious. "Help with what?" "His car," she said, a plea in her tone. "He saved up forever for this beat-up '69 Dodge Charger. Thing's a wreck, sputters like it's on its last leg. I told him you know your way around engines. Please?" I sighed. My stepdad had been a car nut, and I'd spent teenage summers under hoods with him, but I wasn't exactly a pro. Still, Dana was solid, always there when I needed her. "All right," I said. "Where's he at?" She gave me her address, and an hour later, I was rolling up to her double-wide on the outskirts, toolbox rattling in my trunk as the sun dipped low, splashing orange across the pines. The trailer was weathered but neat, and there, in the gravel drive, stood Jake. I'd braced for a shadow of that sticky-fingered kid, but the guy who turned around was a whole new deal. Tall, wiry, with dark hair mussed just right, and a lazy grin that hit like a spark. Grease streaked his forearm, and his faded tee clung to a frame that had clearly been hauling more than memories. "Dana said you'd come," he said, wiping his hands on a rag, his voice low and easy. "Thanks, Ellie. This is kinda random, huh?" I set my toolbox down, meeting his grin. "No biggie. Let's see this beast." The Charger was a fossil, paint peeling, rust gnawing the edges, engine coughing like it had a cold. "Why this one?" I asked, popping the hood. Jake leaned in, shoulder brushing mine. "Always wanted a muscle car. Figured I could fix it up." His green eyes lit up, a stubborn dream there that reminded me of my stepson Nate, back when he'd talk nonstop about his big plans before he took off for the coast. I nodded, rolling up my sleeves. "Okay, let's get to it." We dug in, me showing him how to check the oil, tweak the carburetor, tighten a loose belt. He soaked it up, hands quick, questions sharp, like he was born for this. The sun was dipping below the jagged line of pines as Jake and I wrestled with the Charger's innards, the humid air thick with the sharp bite of motor oil and the earthy scent of the woods around Dana's trailer. We'd been at it for hours, and the old beast was finally starting to purr instead of wheeze like a chain smoker on his last drag. I guided him through flushing the coolant, his hands shadowing mine, quick and steady, picking up every move like he'd been born with a wrench in his grip. "You're a natural at this," I said, wiping a bead of sweat off my forehead with the back of my hand, the heat sticking my shirt to my skin. He flashed a grin, all white teeth and mischief, catching the last rays of daylight. "Only 'cause I've got a damn good coach. Where'd you learn all this?" I leaned against the fender, the metal still warm from the day, its chipped paint rough under my palms. "My stepdad," I said, a flicker of nostalgia tugging at me. "He was a total grease monkey, lived and breathed engines, used to drag me out to the garage when I was a kid, handing me tools and barking orders till I got it right." Jake twirled the wrench in his hand, spinning it like a pro, his eyes glinting with interest. That's badass. My old man wasn't around much, bolted when I was too little to remember. Never had anyone to teach me this kind of thing. His voice stayed light, but there was a crack in it, a shadow I'd heard before in Nate's stories about his deadbeat dad. Well, I said, keeping it breezy, you're catching up fast. Got a knack for it? He shot me a look, half gratitude, half something deeper, and we slipped back into the flow, the clank of metal on metal punctuating the quiet evening. By the time dusk rolled in, painting the sky in purples and blues, the Charger growled with a spark of life, its rumble bouncing off the tin walls of the trailer. Jake stepped back, planting his hands on his hips, a proud tilt to his chin as he surveyed our work. "Think she'll hold up?" he asked, wiping a smear of grease onto his already stained jeans. "Oh, she's got some fight left," I said, tossing him the rag with a smirk. "A few more tweaks and she'll tear up these twisty back roads like she's fresh off the line." He turned to me, his green eyes catching mine and holding them a beat too long, steady and warm. "Thanks, Ellie, for real. I know you didn't sign up to spend your night elbow deep in this mess." I brushed a damp strand of hair from my face, feeling a flush crawl up my neck that had nothing to do with the muggy air. "Anytime," I said, the words slipping out softer than I'd planned, and right then, something shifted. The air thickened, buzzing with a charge I couldn't ignore. The drive back to Pine Hollow was a blur, my hands still tacky with oil. Jake's face stuck on a loop in my head. His low laugh, the way he'd leaned in close to watch me adjust the carburetor, all focus and heat radiating off him. I'd gone over to help Dana's cousin with a car, nothing fancy, but now my mind was racing like I'd floored the gas. At home, I poured a glass of wine, the cool liquid a sharp contrast to the warmth still simmering in me, and flopped onto the couch. The house was too still. Nate long gone to chase waves and wild ideas out west, leaving me to rattle around in this quiet. But tonight, that silence bit harder, sharper. My phone buzzed on the cushion beside me. "Ellie, today was dope. Thanks again, Jake." I smiled a little too wide and tapped back. "Glad to help. That Charger's got soul. Keep at it." His reply flew in fast. "Only 'cause you kicked its ass into gear." I laughed out loud, brushing it off as playful banter, but that little jolt in my chest wasn't joking. This was trouble brewing, and I kinda liked it. Next morning, I was halfway through my coffee, the steam curling up in lazy swirls, when my phone pinged again. "You free today?" Jake's message read. I froze, mug hovering near my lips, the bitter roast grounding me as my pulse ticked up. The smart play was to dodge. Say I had errands, keep it clean and simple. But my days stretched out empty, and something about him, that flicker of fire in his grin yesterday, tugged at me hard. "Not much going on," I typed, thumb hovering before I hit send. "Why?" His reply was instant. "Want to hit the Charger again? Could use your magic touch." I stared at the screen, gut screaming caution, fingers itching to dive in. "Sure," I sent back, exhaling sharp. "Be there in an hour." I set the phone down, heart thumping against my ribs. "Just car stuff," I told myself, grabbing my keys. But as I headed out, the lie tasted thin. This wasn't just about the Charger anymore. The gravel crunched under my tires as I pulled into Dana's driveway, the late morning sun slanting through the pines and glinting off the Charger's hood. Jake was already out there, leaning against the car with that easy slouch of his, a faded ball cap tugged low over his dark hair. He straightened when he saw me, a grin breaking across his face like I'd just made his day. "Didn't think you'd actually show," he said, tossing a rag between his hands, his voice carrying a tease. I stepped out, toolbox clanking, and shot back. "What, and miss round 2 with this beast?" "Not a chance." His laugh rolled out, low and warm, and my stomach did a little flip I couldn't blame on the coffee. We dove into the Charger, the air humming with the clatter of tools and the faint buzz of cicadas in the trees. I showed him how to check the brake lines, his shoulder brushing mine as he crouched close, watching every move like it was a damn masterclass. "You're a pro," he said, straightening up to wipe his brow, leaving a fresh streak of grease across his cheek. "Hardly," I snorted, handing him a socket wrench. "Just picked up enough from my stepdad to fake it till I make it." He grinned, spinning the wrench. "Well, you're faking it real good then." Something in his tone, playful, sure, but edged with a spark, made me glance up, catching his eyes for a beat too long. The hours melted away, the sun climbing high and baking the gravel around us. We tweaked the timing belt, swapped out a clogged filter, and by noon, the Charger's rumble had a new bite to it. Jake revved the engine, leaning out the window with a whoop. "Hear that? She's alive!" I laughed, wiping my hands on my jeans. "Told you she had soul, just needed a little love." He cut the ignition and hopped out, landing closer than he had to. "Couldn't have done it without you, Ellie," he said, his voice dropping, green eyes locking on mine. "You're stuck with me now." My breath hitched, but I played it off with a shrug. "Guess I've got worse gigs." Back home that evening, I couldn't shake him. The way he'd hovered near, all easy confidence and quiet heat, stuck to me like the oil still under my nails. I paced the kitchen, the house too big, too empty without Nate's chatter or my stepdad's old radio blaring. My phone buzzed on the counter. "Today was killer. You're the real MVP, Jake." I smirked, typing back, "Team effort. That Charger's coming alive." His reply popped up fast. "Yeah, but you're the spark plug." That damn winking emoji again. I rolled my eyes, but the grin tugging at my lips wouldn't quit. He was 19, Dana's kid cousin, Nate's age if he'd stuck around. I was 46, a woman who should know better. But that flutter in my chest didn't care about math. The next day, I was scrubbing dishes when my phone pinged again. "Got time this afternoon?" Jake's text read. I paused, suds dripping from my hands, the sensible part of me screaming to pump the brakes. I had laundry, bills, a life to keep in line, but the truth, I wanted to go. Wanted to see that grin, hear that laugh, feel the buzz of whatever this was. "Maybe," I typed, teasing the line. "What's up?" His reply was instant. "More Charger work. Need my co-pilot." Co-pilot. The word hit soft but deep, and before I could talk myself out of it, I sent, "All right, I'm in. See you soon." I dried my hands, grabbed my jacket, and headed out, heart thumping like a bass line. This was still just about the car, right? When I rolled up, Jake was tinkering under the hood, his shirt clinging to him in the afternoon heat, a sheen of sweat on his neck. He glanced up, that grin flashing again. "Knew you couldn't resist," he said, tossing me a rag like we'd been at this forever. "Had to see if you'd crash without me," I shot back, stepping into the shade of the carport. He laughed and we fell into it, tools clinking, oil smudging, the Charger purring louder with every fix. But it wasn't just the car humming. Every time he leaned close, every time his hand grazed mine passing a bolt, the air crackled. I caught myself watching him, the flex of his arms, the focus in his eyes, and wondered when I'd stop pretending this was only about mechanics. The afternoon sun hung heavy over Pine Hollow as I pulled up to Dana's trailer again, the Charger's silhouette a dark smudge against the gravel drive. Jake was already out there, sprawled on a creeper under the car, his legs sticking out like he owned the damn place. He rolled out when he heard my engine, popping up with that grin, half cocky, half boyish, that was starting to feel like a hook in my gut. "Back for more punishment?" he called, brushing dirt off his hands, his shirt streaked with fresh oil. I climbed out, slinging my toolbox over my shoulder. "Someone's got to keep you from turning this into a bonfire," I said, smirking as I nodded at the Charger. We slid into the work like it was second nature, the clatter of metal and the low hum of the woods wrapping around us. I showed him how to bleed the brakes, his head bent close to mine as I talked him through it, his breath warm against my arm. "You're a machine," he said, watching me pump the pedal, his voice low with a note I couldn't ignore. "Just stubborn," I shot back, brushing it off, but my pulse ticked up anyway. He handed me a wrench, fingers grazing mine, and I caught a flash in his green eyes, sharp, deliberate. The Charger wasn't the only thing heating up under that carport. By late afternoon, the car's growl had sharpened, a mean rumble that echoed through the trees. Jake revved it, leaning out the window with a wild laugh. "Listen to her sing!" he yelled, cutting the engine and hopping out, landing close enough that I could smell the sweat and grease on him. "Told you she'd come alive," I said, stepping back to wipe my hands, needing the space to breathe. He tilted his head, studying me. "Couldn't have done it without you, Ellie. You're stuck with this gig now." His tone was light, but his eyes weren't, and my chest tightened. "Guess I've survived worse," I said, playing it cool, but the air felt thick, electric. Driving home, the sunset streaking the sky in pinks and golds, Jake's voice stuck with me, low and rough, like gravel under tires. I'd gone over to help a kid fix a car, nothing deep, but now my head was a mess of him. His hands, his laugh, the way he looked at me like I was more than just a wrench turner. Back at the house, I poured a glass of wine and paced the living room, the quiet clawing at me. Nate's old guitar still sat in the corner, untouched since he'd bolted west, and the emptiness hit harder tonight. My phone buzzed. "Ellie, you're a legend. Today was sick. Jake." I smiled, typing back. "Teamwork makes the dream work. She's purring now." His reply pinged fast. "Yeah, but you're the fire under her hood." That winking emoji again. I laughed, but my heart wasn't laughing. Later, sprawled on the couch, I replayed it all, the grease on his cheek, the heat of him next to me. He was 19, Dana's cousin, fresh out of high school, and I was 46, a woman who'd raised a kid his age. This should have been simple, help out, bow out, but it wasn't. My phone sat there, tempting me to text him, but I didn't, not yet. I sipped my wine, the cool glass grounding me, and tried to shove it down. It was just a car, just a favor. Except it wasn't, and I knew it. The next morning, scrubbing the breakfast dishes, my phone buzzed again. "You around later?" Jake's text read. I stared at it, suds dripping onto the counter, my brain yelling to shut this down, but my hands had other plans. "Not much on the docket," I typed, hesitating before sending. "What's up?" His reply flew back. "More charger tweaks. Need my wingman." Wingman. The word landed soft but heavy, tugging at something I couldn't name. I should have said no. Laundry, groceries, anything, but I didn't. "All right," I sent. "I'll swing by." I dried my hands, grabbed my keys, and headed out, the hum of my truck matching the buzz in my chest. This was still about the car, I told myself, winding through the back roads. But when I pulled up and saw him, shirt clinging to him in the heat, that damn grin flashing, I knew I was kidding myself. This was something else, and I was already in too deep to turn back. The late afternoon sky over Pine Hollow was turning a lazy shade of amber as I rolled up to Dana's trailer, the Charger gleaming in the drive like it knew it was the star of this show. Jake was sprawled on the ground beside it, a wrench in hand, his shirt rucked up just enough to show a sliver of tanned skin above his jeans. He slid out from under the car when my truck growled to a stop, popping up with that grin, sharp, reckless, and way too inviting. "Knew you'd come back," he said, brushing his hands off, his voice low and teasing. I stepped out, toolbox swinging, and tossed him a smirk. "Can't leave you to blow this thing up solo." We fell into the work, the air thick with the hum of crickets and the faint tang of gasoline. I showed him how to adjust the fuel line, his body close as he peered over my shoulder, heat radiating off him in the sticky warmth. "You're a wizard," he murmured, his breath brushing my ear, sending a shiver down my spine I couldn't dodge. "Just tricks from an old dog," I said, keeping my tone light. But my hands fumbled the wrench, and he caught it, his fingers lingering on mine. "Not that old," he said, eyes locking with mine, green and steady, and the space between us shrank to nothing. The Charger purred smoother by the time the sun dipped low, its rumble a low growl through the trees. Jake revved it, then cut the engine, hopping out with a laugh that echoed in the quiet. "She's a beast now," he said, stepping close. Too close, his boots scuffing the gravel. "All you," I replied, wiping my hands, but he shook his head. "Nah, Ellie, it's us." His voice dropped, soft and rough, and when he looked at me, it wasn't about the car anymore. My pulse kicked up loud in my ears and I should have stepped back. I didn't. We stood there, the trailer's shadow stretching long across the yard, the air heavy with something unspoken. "Your trouble," I said, half laughing, trying to break it, but he just grinned, stepping closer still. "Maybe, but you're here for it." His hand brushed my arm, casual-like, but it wasn't casual, not the way it lingered, warm and slow, tracing up to my elbow. My breath caught and I didn't pull away. "Jake?" I started, my voice shaky, but he tilted his head, eyes searching mine. "Yeah?" he said, soft, like he was daring me to finish that thought. I don't know who moved first. Maybe me, maybe him. But suddenly his hand was on my waist, tentative, testing, and mine slid to his shoulder, feeling the muscle tense under my grip. The world narrowed to the heat of him, the faint sweat and oil on his skin, the way his chest rose sharp and fast. "This is crazy," I whispered, but my fingers tightened, pulling him in, and his lips hovered near mine, close enough I could feel his breath. "Crazy's my specialty," he murmured, that grin flashing before it softened, and then he kissed me, slow at first, careful, like he was waiting for me to bolt. I didn't. The kiss deepened, his hand sliding up my back, pulling me flush against him, and I melted into it, my hands finding his hair, tugging just enough to make him groan low in his throat. It was reckless, wild, everything I shouldn't want, 19 to my 46, Dana's cousin, Nate's shadow in my mind. But it felt right, like a match striking flame. His lips were firm, insistent, and when his fingers grazed the skin under my shirt, a jolt shot through me, sharp and electric. I pressed closer, the Charger's hood cool against my thigh as we leaned into it, the world fading to just us, just this. We broke apart, breathless, his forehead resting against mine, his hands still on me, steadying us both. "Damn, Ellie," he panted, a laugh bubbling up, his eyes bright and wild. I laughed too, shaky, my heart hammering like the Charger's engine at full throttle. "What the hell are we doing?" I said, but I didn't move, didn't want to. He grinned, brushing a thumb along my jaw. "Something good, I hope." The trailer door creaked in the distance. Dana wasn't home, but it snapped me back, a cold splash of reality. "We should," I started, but he nodded, stepping back, his hand lingering on mine. "Yeah, but not done, right?" I swallowed, nodding. "Not done." The air around Dana's trailer hung thick and still as Jake and I stood there, the Charger's hood still warm against my leg, our breaths ragged in the fading light. His hand lingered on mine, rough and warm, his thumb tracing slow circles that sent sparks skittering up my arm. My heart was a jackhammer, pounding out a rhythm I couldn't quiet, and his eyes, green and blazing, held mine like he was daring me to look away. "Ellie," he said, voice low and gravelly. "You okay?" I nodded, swallowing hard, my lips still tingling from his kiss, processing. He grinned, that reckless edge softening into something tender, and it twisted me up inside. I stepped back, needing air, needing space. But my body didn't want to go far. The trailer loomed behind us, silent and empty, Dana still at work, thank God. But the creak of that door had jolted me, a reminder of where we were, who we were. "This is a lot," I said, running a hand through my hair, the strands damp with sweat. Jake nodded, leaning against the car, his shirt clinging to him in the heat, outlining every line I'd just felt under my hands. "Yeah, it is," he said, quiet but sure. "But I don't regret it. Do you?" His eyes searched mine, and I should have lied, should have said yes, called it a mistake, walked away. "No," I admitted, voice barely above a whisper, and his grin widened, relief flashing across his face. He stepped closer again, slow, like he was testing the waters, and I didn't stop him. His hand found my waist, pulling me in, and this time the kiss was softer, less frantic, but it hit deeper, his lips moving with a purpose that made my knees weak. My fingers slid up his chest, tracing the hard planes beneath his shirt, and he hummed against my mouth, a sound that vibrated through me. "You're killing me," he murmured, pulling back just enough to rest his forehead against mine, his breath hot on my skin. I laughed, shaky, my hands still on him. "You're not the only one." The world felt small, just us and the charger, the pines whispering around us as the sky bruised purple. His fingers slipped under my shirt again, brushing the skin above my jeans, and I shivered, pressing closer, the heat of him searing through me. "Jake," I said, half warning, half plea, but he just kissed me again, slow and deep, his hand sliding up my back, pulling me tight against him. It was dizzying, his taste, his touch, the way he moved like he'd already mapped me out. My hands tangled in his hair, tugging, and he groaned, low and rough, his grip tightening like he couldn't get close enough. Headlights swept across the drive, sharp and sudden, snapping us apart. My heart lurched as I spun, expecting Dana's truck, but it was just some neighbor rolling past, oblivious. Jake laughed, breathless, running a hand through his mussed hair. "Shit, thought we were busted." I exhaled, a nervous giggle bubbling up. "Yeah, that'd be a hell of a story." He grinned, stepping back but not far, his hand brushing mine. "Worth it, though." I looked at him, 19, cocky, too damn charming, and felt the weight of it crash in. "We can't just keep doing this out here," I said, voice unsteady. He nodded, eyes serious now. "Then come inside." The invitation hung there, heavy and real. I glanced at the trailer, dark, empty, a line I hadn't crossed yet. "Jake," I started, but he cut me off, soft but firm. "No pressure, Ellie, just want to be with you, somewhere we don't have to jump at shadows." My chest tightened, a mix of want and fear, but his hand squeezed mine, grounding me. "Okay," I said, barely audible, and he led me toward the door, his touch steady as we stepped inside. The trailer was dim, cluttered with Dana's stuff, but it felt like a bubble, shutting out the world. He turned to me, close again, and kissed me. Gentle this time, a question in it. I answered with my hands, pulling him in, and the heat flared back, softer but no less wild. We sank onto the couch, the springs creaking under us, his arm around me, my head against his shoulder. "This okay?" he murmured, his fingers tracing my arm. "Yeah," I said, leaning into him, the chaos in my head settling into something warm, something real. We didn't push further, not yet, just sat there, tangled up, the charger's rumble still echoing in my mind. But I knew this wasn't the end of it. Whatever this was, it was growing, and I wasn't sure I could stop it, or if I even wanted to. The trailer's dim glow wrapped around us as Jake and I sank deeper into the couch, the faint hum of the AC buzzing through the quiet. His arm was slung around me, warm and solid, my head resting against his shoulder as his fingers traced lazy patterns on my arm. The charger's rumble still lingered in my ears, but it was his heartbeat, steady, close, that anchored me now. "You good?" he asked, voice soft, his breath stirring my hair. I nodded, tilting my head to meet his eyes, green and searching, softer than I'd expected. "Yeah," I murmured, my hand resting on his chest, feeling the thud beneath my palm. "You?" He grinned, that cocky edge softened by the moment. "Better than good." His hand slid to mine, lacing our fingers, and he pulled me closer, his lips brushing my forehead in a move so tender it caught me off guard. My chest tightened, a mix of warmth and something sharp, guilt maybe, or fear, but I pushed it down, leaning into him. The couch creaked as he shifted, turning to face me, his free hand cupping my cheek. "Ellie," he said, low and serious. "I don't know what this is, but I'm not messing around." His thumb grazed my jaw and I shivered, caught in the weight of his words. I should have pulled back, said something smart, something safe, but instead I kissed him. Slow, deliberate, my hands sliding up his neck, fingers threading through his dark hair. He groaned, soft and deep, pulling me tighter, his lips parting against mine as the heat flared back to life. It wasn't frantic like outside, just steady, consuming. Like we'd found a rhythm we didn't need to rush. His hand slipped under my shirt, tracing the curve of my spine, and I arched into him, a quiet gasp escaping me. "You're trouble," I whispered against his mouth, and he chuckled, warm and low. "You started it," he shot back, kissing me deeper, his grip firm on my waist. The trailer felt smaller, the world shrinking to just us. His taste, his heat, the way he moved like he'd already claimed this space between us. My hands roamed his chest, tugging at his shirt, and he broke the kiss long enough to yank it off, tossing it aside with a grin. I froze for a second, taking him in, lean muscle, a faint scar on his shoulder, the way his skin glowed in the low light. "Damn," I muttered, and he laughed, pulling me back in, his lips finding my neck, trailing heat that made my head spin. "Your turn," he teased, tugging at my shirt, and I let him, the fabric hitting the floor as his hands found me again, warm and sure. We were tangled now, bare skin against bare skin, the couch too small but perfect somehow. His kisses slowed, lingering on my collarbone, my shoulder, every touch deliberate, like he was memorizing me. "Ellie," he murmured, voice rough, "you're incredible." My heart stuttered, and I pulled him closer, losing myself in him, the feel of his hands, the press of his body, the wild, reckless freedom of it. But then, a key rattled in the lock, sharp and jarring, and we froze, breaths shallow. "Shit," Jake hissed, pulling back, his eyes wide. I scrambled for my shirt, heart slamming as the door swung open. Dana stepped in, grocery bags in hand, her tired frown shifting to shock as she clocked us. Me half-dressed, Jake shirtless, the air thick with what we'd been doing. "Ellie? Jake?" Her voice was a mix of disbelief and something harder. I yanked my shirt on, heat flooding my face. "Dana, I started, but she cut me off, dropping the bags with a thud. "What the hell's going on?" Jake stood, hands up like he could calm this storm. "It's not what you think," he said. But it was exactly what she thought, and we all knew it. My stomach dropped, the intimacy we'd built crashing into reality. "Dana, listen," I said, voice shaky, stepping forward. "It just happened." She stared at me, then Jake, her jaw tight. "He's 19, Ellie. 19. And you're like family." The words stung, sharp and true, and I flinched. Jake moved beside me, his hand brushing mine, a quiet stand. "It's not her fault," he said, firm. "I wanted this too." Dana shook her head, grabbing her bags. "I need a minute," she muttered, storming to the kitchen. The silence that followed was brutal, Jake's hand still on mine, the heat between us now laced with something heavy, consequences I hadn't let myself see till now. The trailer's air hung heavy as Dana stood in the kitchen doorway, grocery bags at her feet, her eyes darting between me and Jake like she couldn't compute the scene, me fumbling with my shirt, him bare-chested, the couch still rumpled from us. "Dana," I said, voice cracking, stepping forward, but she held up a hand, her face a storm of hurt and disbelief. "Don't," she snapped, sharp enough to cut. "I can't deal with this right now." Jake shifted beside me, his jaw tight. "Dana, it's not," he started, but she shook her head, grabbing her keys off the counter. "I'm going to Mom's. Sort yourselves out," she said, voice flat, and stormed out, the door slamming behind her like a gunshot. The silence crashed in, thick and suffocating. I stood there, shirt crooked, my heart pounding as Jake's hand brushed mine, tentative but firm. "Ellie," he said, low and steady, turning to me. His green eyes were dark, searching, but there was no backpedaling in them, just want, raw and unapologetic. "You okay?" I exhaled, shaky, the chaos in my head swirling. Dana's words, the age gap, the mess we'd made, but his touch grounded me. "No," I admitted, then laughed, brittle. "But I don't want you to go." His grin flickered, soft and dangerous, and he pulled me close, his hands framing my face. "Good. 'Cause I'm not." The space between us vanished as he kissed me, hard and urgent, all the restraint from before burning away. My hands slid up his chest, bare and warm, fingers digging into his shoulders as he pressed me back against the couch. "Jake," I breathed, half warning, but he just grinned against my lips. "Say no if you want," he murmured, his hand sliding under my shirt again, peeling it off with a slow, deliberate tug. I didn't say no. I pulled him down instead, the springs creaking as we sank into the cushions, his weight a solid heat over me. His shirt was already gone, and mine hit the floor again, the air cool against my skin as his hands roamed, waist, hips, higher, mapping me with a hunger that made my breath hitch. I arched into him, tugging at his jeans, and he kicked them off, a low laugh rumbling in his throat as he caught my wrists, pinning them above my head. "You're killing me," he said, voice rough, kissing me deep, his body pressing flush against mine. The trailer faded. The guilt, Dana, everything. Just him, his taste, the way he moved, sure and wild. My hands broke free, sliding down his back, nails grazing as he groaned, his lips trailing heat down my neck, my chest, every touch igniting me. Clothes piled on the floor. Jeans, mine,
Hello.
his,
How was your
until it was
meeting?
just us,
Successful?
skin on skin, the couch too small but perfect for this. He paused, hovering over me, eyes locked on mine, a question in them. "Ellie," he said, breathless. "You sure?" I nodded, pulling him closer, my legs wrapping around him. "Don't stop," I whispered, and he didn't. It was slow at first, careful, his hands gripping my hips as we found a rhythm. But then it built, fast, desperate, a wave crashing through us. I gasped, clinging to him, his name slipping out as he moved, every thrust a spark that lit me up. He buried his face in my neck, panting, his grip tightening as we lost ourselves, the world shrinking to just this heat, this need, this wild, perfect mess. It peaked sharp and sudden, a rush that left me trembling, his breath ragged against my skin as he followed, collapsing over me with a groan. We lay there, tangled, sweaty, the trailer quiet except for our breathing and the faint tick of the cooling charger outside. He shifted, propping up on an elbow, his grin lazy and sated as he brushed hair from my face. "Holy shit, Ellie," he said, laughing soft, and I laughed too, dizzy and alive. "Yeah," I managed, my hand resting on his chest, feeling his heartbeat slow. The guilt would come, I knew it, but right then, it was just us, the echo of what we'd done wrapping around us like a secret. He pulled me close, his arm draping over me, and we stayed there, the couch creaking under us, the night stretching out beyond the windows. "Worth it?" he murmured, his lips brushing my temple. I nodded, nestled against him, the warmth of him sinking into me. "Yeah," I said, soft but sure. Dana's exit, the fallout, it had hit later. For now, it was just Jake, me, and the wild thing we'd let loose, burning bright in the dark. The trailer was hushed, the only sounds the faint creak of the couch beneath us and the soft hum of the night seeping through the walls. Jake's arm was heavy around me, his breath warm against my neck as we lay tangled, the sweat still cooling on our skin. The charger ticked outside, a quiet reminder of how this all started. But my mind was spinning, half drunk on him, half dreading the crash that was coming. His fingers traced idle lines along my side, and I shivered, nestling closer despite the chaos brewing in my chest. "You're quiet," he murmured, his voice rough with the edge of sleep, pulling back to look at me. His green eyes were soft, unguarded, and it hit me hard, how much I didn't want this to end. "Yeah," I said, forcing a small smile, my hand resting on his chest, feeling the steady thud beneath. "Just taking it in." He grinned, lazy and warm, brushing a kiss across my forehead. "Good kind of taking it in, I hope." I nodded, but the truth was messier. Electric, sure, but laced with a guilt that was starting to claw its way up. Dana's face flashed in my mind, her shock, her hurt, and I tensed, the bubble we'd built popping under the weight of it. Jake caught it, his hand stilling. "Ellie," he said softer. "What's going on?" I sat up, pulling the throw blanket over me, the air suddenly too cool against my bare skin. "Dana," I said, the name heavy on my tongue. "She saw us, Jake. She's pissed, and she's right to be. He sat up too, the couch groaning, his jaw tightening as he ran a hand through his mussed hair. "Yeah, that was a shit show," he admitted, but his eyes didn't waver. "But I'm not sorry about this. About us." His hand found mine, squeezing, and I wanted to lean into that certainty, but doubt gnawed at me. "She's family to me," I said, voice cracking. "And you're 19. This isn't simple." He shifted closer, his warmth cutting through the chill settling in me. "I know it's not," he said, firm but gentle. "But I'm not a kid, Ellie. I know what I want, and it's you. Dane'll get over it. She's mad, not blind." His thumb brushed my knuckles, and I laughed, shaky, caught between wanting to believe him and the reality staring me down. "You're too damn sure of yourself," I said, but my hand stayed in his, tethered. He grinned, leaning in to kiss me, soft, lingering, and it stirred that fire again, making it harder to think straight. The night stretched on, and we didn't move far, just stayed there, talking, touching, the intimacy shifting into something quieter but no less intense. He told me about his plans, mechanic school, fixing up the charger, a life he was carving out, and I found myself opening up too about Nate, about the years I'd spent playing it safe after my stepdad passed. "You deserve more than safe," he said, his voice low, his hand resting on my thigh, warm through the blanket. "Maybe," I murmured, leaning against him, the guilt still there, but dulled by the weight of him next to me. My phone buzzed on the coffee table, shattering the haze, an unknown number, but the text was clear. "It's Dana. Staying at Mom's tonight. We need to talk tomorrow." My stomach dropped, and Jake saw it, his arm tightening around me. "She's cooling off," he said, reading the screen over my shoulder. "Give her time." I nodded, but the knot in my gut tightened. Tomorrow meant facing this, no more hiding in the dark with him. "What if she doesn't?" I asked, voice small. He pulled me closer, his lips brushing my temple. "Then we figure it out, together." The word landed soft, heavy, and I wanted it. God, I wanted it. But the world outside this trailer wasn't going to make it easy. We drifted off eventually, tangled on that lumpy couch, his heartbeat a steady drum against my back. I woke to dawn creeping through the blinds, gray light painting the room, Jake still out cold beside me, his arm slung over my waist. I watched him sleep. Messy hair, lashes dark against his skin, that cocky grin softened, and felt a pang, sharp and sweet. My phone buzzed again. "Meet me at the diner 10. Don't bring him, D." I exhaled, slipping out from under his arm, careful not to wake him. I scribbled a note. "Gone to see Dana. Back later. E." And left it by his keys, grabbing my jacket as I stepped into the cool morning. Whatever this was with Jake, it was real. But Dana's reckoning was coming, and I had to face it alone.